Well, welcome to The Perspective. I'm Lorie Hartshorn and sitting in Mike's chair all this week. It's a privilege to be with you. We're going to have some amazing conversations. And I hope wherever you are and wherever you're watching that you'll find today's show and all this week really encouraging because we all need a little encouragement, right? I know that we can feel overwhelmed by so many issues in our world today. And certainly one of them is the rise of poverty that we see really all over the world, but particularly in North America. More and more individuals and families are struggling to make ends meet. You know, it's hard to afford groceries. I was shocked at the price of a loaf of bread the other day, let alone pay for a mortgage. You know, the divide between the haves and the have-nots, well, it's widening. And we used to think that poverty was more of an issue for those maybe in those other countries, not Canada or the US. Yet today, you don't have to look far, do you, in your own town or city to see the number of people on the streets or families that need shelter or care. So many are without jobs and unable to thrive in life. And you might have even said, you know, someone should do something about this. But who? Well, today I want you to meet someone who is doing something about it. Angie Peters is an inspiring and collaborative leader in Toronto's social sector, serving the communities where she grew up. She's the CEO of Young Street Mission and has recently released her book, Just Act. We are the solution to poverty. Yes, you caught it, we. And Angie knows what it feels like to see a problem and to be overwhelmed by it and not know what to do. And in her book, well, she shares practical steps that both you and I can take to become part of the solution. So, welcome to The Perspective, Angie. It's great to have you with us.
It's great to be here, Lori. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, Angie, you've worked for many years in poverty reduction, both locally and globally. And for many of us, you know, the real issue of poverty feels overwhelming. So, what was the catalyst behind you writing this amazing book, Just Act?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And I think, so as you know, I've been serving at Young Street Mission for a little over 11 years, and we're in the downtown east of Toronto, which has a very high percentage of the population experiencing poverty. And so that's what I do. And during the pandemic, I had this experience where a lot of people were calling me because the pandemic sort of shone a light on the degree to which poverty had grown in our country. And they were surprised by that and they were disturbed by that. And they were all asking, how did it get this bad? And why isn't the system working? And what can I do that would really make a difference? I'm not sure that what I'm doing is really making a difference. And so, in having those conversations and seeking to give people real answers to work with, I realized there wasn't an awful lot out there to help them. There's lots of books that tell a lot of sad stories. And so then they're sad, but they still don't know what to do. There's lots of books that give overwhelming statistics. So then they're sad and they're overwhelmed, but they don't know what to do. And so I thought, there needs to be something practical. There needs to be something that just answers people's questions. I think by and large, if you've never been exposed to poverty, you can't understand what it's like today. So, that makes perfect sense that you wouldn't understand. And so answer people's questions and then really just give a simple roadmap to figure out what, each person is uniquely equipped to do that would have not just a little impact, but a big impact, a generational impact. And so that's why I wrote the book.
Well, you know, I love the book. I've read it. You've personally challenged me to step out in my own area of life, and I want to do something about it, right? And many of us genuinely do want to do something. But to your point, we actually just don't know what to do and feel overwhelmed, and it can be paralyzing. Most of us just
Mhm.
do nothing because we don't know what to do. So, how can one person be the solution to poverty, as your subtitle suggests?
Yeah, yeah. Well, this is the thing. And so I'll tell a story to answer that question, which really illustrates how ordinary people can have such a significant impact doing something that they think is nothing, like is simple. And so I'll tell you the story of Barbara. Barbara was the oldest of 11 children. She grew up in a household where her father was an alcoholic and he abused the boys and the girls regularly in different ways. And so it wasn't safe or good. And though Barbara really loved school and was doing really well in school as the oldest, she was pulled out at a young age and had to go to work to help provide for the family. As the years went on, she did do that. She took good care, and her younger siblings did quite well, the ones she was looking after. But she wanted to have a family of her own. And so she went about that in a way that reflected her trauma and wasn't ideal for everybody or anybody. But she ended up having three children with three different men and living on social income in a rent assisted unit, uh, suffering with depression and agoraphobia, which means she had the fear of leaving the house. And so she was living in that context, raising these three children. And when you hear that, that's the sad story, right? That's the story that makes you think, oh, what could possibly be done? What is going to be the future for Barbara and those children? And so this is where it gets good, Lorie. This is where two ordinary people step in. The first person is a piano teacher. So Barbara wanted her oldest daughter to get piano lessons. Somehow she found a way to make that happen. The daughter toddles off to piano lessons at a young age on her own, and the piano teacher thinks this is odd and so reaches out to the mom, who she'd only spoken to over the phone, and recognizes there's a concern there. And so, because she was wired as a caregiver and a person of faith, she chose to reach out and get to know Barbara. And through that relationship, help Barbara heal and find healing in her faith and have hope. And so, little time moves on. Barbara has hope. She finds a better neighborhood for her family to live in. Her son makes friends with a little boy, and Barbara meets that little boy's mother, Pat. And at this point, Barbara's hopeful, but she's afraid. She wants to go back to work and she doesn't know how to get started. And so Pat does what was natural to her. She just says, well, what do you like to do? And helps her surface what matters to her, what she enjoys doing, helps her find some courses to take, helps her get through those courses. And when all was said and done, she hired her. So here you have it, right? You go from that hopeless sounding situation to two ordinary people stepping in and doing at different times in Barbara's life what was really normal and not a big deal for them to do. But it was a big deal because now Barbara goes from the situation she started in to going out to work, providing for her family. And not only did the actions of Pat and the piano teacher help Barbara, but it helped her three children, it helped her five grandchildren, and the impact is trickling on and on. And I know the impact because Barbara was my mother, and I'm the oldest daughter who went to those piano lessons.
Wow. Oh, man. You know what? That is so powerful, Angie. I
Mm,
sometimes you just think what you're doing in life, you're a piano teacher, how could it make a difference? But
mhm.
what intentionality to show care and look at the generational difference it's made. I mean, I know you and I know a little bit about your siblings, and all of you are incredibly successful. Like the cycle of poverty is broken in your family.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
right? Like, tell us about this term generational poverty and what's the difference between sort of episodic poverty and generational poverty?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that when we think about the poverty numbers, so for example, in the city of Toronto, it's about, it's over now 532,000 people. That's there's different types of poverty within that. The first type is people who just shouldn't be poor, shouldn't even be in that category. Society should care for our seniors. Society should care for persons with disabilities who are unable to work. That's a different conversation. The next group of people that's in those numbers are episodic poverty, and that's life. Those are the poor we'll always have among us, if you will. From time to time, people will lose their jobs, need retraining, go back, get sick, need support, go back. There'll always be life that happens to people, and so we'll always need supports for that kind of temporary episodic poverty. But generational poverty is like my mother's, right? Where, there's trauma and brokenness and it's passed from generation to generation to generation, and there's hopelessness embedded in that. And were it not for the interventions of Pat and the piano teacher, it could have been my future too.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be. And that's the beauty of this.
Right. Right. That is so helpful. I think sometimes when we don't understand poverty, we sort of all see it as a cycle that can't be broken. And
Mhm.
what difference can we make, right? But I really appreciate you breaking that down. And thank you for sharing the story of your mom. I believe there's people watching today that, maybe we've missed the Barbaras.
Mhm.
Like there's Barbaras around each one of us. And we're going to talk more about this when we come back. We're going to take a quick break, but I just want to encourage you watching. Is there a Barbara near you? Maybe
Mhm.
already in your life, but you just need to take that next step of acting. Just act. We're going to learn more about that in just a minute. We'll be right back. Well, welcome back. And we're with Angie Peters, CEO of Young Street Mission. Angie just shared the powerful story of your mom, Barbara, and
Mm.
how the cycle and generational cycle of poverty was broken in your family. And you believe it can be broken in other families as well. What are some of the deeper needs in people's lives that need to be met for people like Barbara to thrive?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's very basic, the answer to that question. What are the needs in our lives, right?
Right.
We need to be seen. We need to be valued. We
Yeah.
need to belong to healthy community. We need to be nurtured or supported when we're in a difficult time. These are the things that we all need, and it's no different for someone experiencing poverty. It just sometimes manifests differently. And we need to believe in people
Yeah.
first and foremost. I mean, I think that's the main thing.
Yeah.
Quick story about one of our lived experience leaders that I have the privilege of working with. Lived experience leader just means someone who's currently experiencing poverty who's helping us lead change initiatives in the system. And her name is Melissa. And I got to tell you, this is a person that most people in society would look at and say, she probably just wants to be on aid and doesn't really care. But this woman works so hard. And she had lost custody of her daughter and she was working so hard. And she was on disability support payments, but she was also working part-time jobs. And she worked so hard, did everything right, and regained custody of her daughter. And they were reunited. And boy, did we rejoice with her when that happened.
Yeah.
And we were believing in her too, and that helped her make those steps and have the courage to do that. But then here's what happened. She started working harder and harder because her daughter needed school supplies, needed a uniform, and she wanted to provide for her and just really care for this reunification with a teenage girl, right? Which is going to be difficult. And so she worked extra hours. And then the day came for a call with her caseworker, who basically said, Melissa, you worked too much last month. We're going to claw back 50% of what you earned out of your support payments.
Wow.
And so think about that. So what we didn't give her is what we all need, which is a practical path forward,
Yes.
not a slap on the wrist because you
Right.
worked too hard. And so what does that do? That was devastating for her.
Yeah.
It told her it doesn't matter how hard she works, she can't get ahead. And here's the thing, guess who's watching that? Her daughter is watching that. And
Right.
her daughter is learning that you can't work your way out of poverty. And so,
Wow.
what kind of decisions is this teenage girl going to make in her life if she thinks she can't get ahead?
Yeah.
So, I think the other important thing, we need to believe in people and we need to give them a chance.
Yes. That's such a good reminder. I think just the simple fact that we all need the same things.
Hmm.
So to treat those fairly who are either working with us or even those that are in our neighborhood or we pass on the street, we really need to see them as human beings in need of the same things that we're in need of. This is a good reminder. And you talk about in one of your chapters, you talk about that we believe the social support systems in our countries are really our response. Like somehow the system will take care of poverty. Can you address why this should not be the case?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we need social support systems. They play a vital role. It's just that, the challenges, they were all just designed, you know, Back in the 40s, actually, based on a
Wow.
report that was done by Sir William Beveridge in the UK. When you look around westernized societies, all of our social systems are kind of based on that. In Canada, Tommy Douglas started it, but it was based on that model. And we haven't kept them up.
Right.
They're not working anymore. And so if you look in our province that we're in, Laurie, in Ontario, Canada, if you're receiving social assistance, you're receiving anywhere to between 20 and 60% below the poverty line as your payment.
Wow.
It's not taking you to the poverty line, it's below the poverty line, which means someone like a Melissa is every day is in survival mode. What
Yeah.
bill do I pay? What meal do I skip? How do I get from day to day to day? Because what I'm trying to work with is is wholly insufficient just to survive.
Yeah.
And so the system, it's not bad to have a system, but it's it needs a reboot. It
Yeah.
just really needs a reboot if it's going to be something that genuinely helps somebody
Mhm.
stabilize so that they can work and have success and ultimately realize their goals and move out of poverty.
Yeah, that's so good. I mean, you shared at your book launch, you shared really significant numbers that stood out to me in regards to like how many people are actually in it's let's take Toronto for instance. Can you break it down? A big city like Toronto, which would be similar to
Mhm.
some big US cities. Break down the numbers for us. We have a sort of a better picture of this problem of poverty and what it looks like.
Yeah, for sure. So in Toronto, it's over 530,000 people who are experiencing poverty, and we use the low income measure after taxes as that line. That's where that comes from. And I would say, educated guess, it's really hard to know for sure based on how we track numbers, but approximately 350,000 of those individuals are in this generational poverty category.
Right,
They're stuck. Um, that sounds like a lot, but Toronto's a city of over 2.5 million people. That means 2 million people aren't poor,
right.
which means only 18% of us need to decide to help one person. Just be helping one person doing the thing that, if we're like Pat, helping somebody, study and find a job, if we're like the piano teacher, helping somebody find healing in their faith, or a myriad of other examples that are in the book.
Yeah,
18% of us just need to do something to help one person and always be helping one person, recognizing they're only one intervention in that person's journey. They don't have to see it through to the end.
yeah,
Um, and that's part of it, kind of accepting we won't see the end. Like you think about Pat and the piano teacher, they have no idea of the legacy of their choice, but it's huge.
yeah.
And even 18%, you say, well, that's a lot, Ange, 350,000 people. But if you look at charitable giving and volunteering in this city, there's already 18% that care. That's for sure. And they're the ones that were calling me saying, what can I do that would really make a difference?
Yeah.
And this is the answer.
You know what? That really encouraged me because I thought I could be part of the 18%. I could be part of
Right.
the 20%. You know what I mean? Like, what
Yes.
is the just act that I can do? I mean, we only have a minute left here, Angie. Wish we could talk all day. We could talk all day
Yeah.
about this. But tell me
We
about,
have talked all day about
yeah,
this.
I know. Tell me about the picture on the front of this book, this
Yeah.
beautiful purple flower, but it's coming out of a concrete crack. Tell me about the
Yeah.
picture.
I think this goes to understanding what poverty is really like. We think that everybody has equal opportunity and we value that. But the truth is, if you've grown up like my mom did, you're planted in concrete. There's an awful lot holding you back. And many of us were planted in rich soil. And so we instantly thrive because we're planted in rich soil. But if you're planted in concrete, there's a lot holding you back. And yet it doesn't. And then look at the resilience of that flower. It's trying anyway. It's trying to thrive in the concrete. And that is the truth about people who are coming from generational poverty. They do care. They do have dreams. They dream just like us. They want the same things. We just need to help chip away some of that concrete.
Yeah, I love this. Well, I'm encouraging you to get the book, Just Act. You can buy the book where all books are sold. And it's not just there's incredible stories, but it's a book that will equip you. It will inspire you and equip you to, as Angie unpacks the Just Act cycle. I'm trying to apply this in my own life. And I thank you so much for writing it, Angie. God bless you and your work at Young Street Mission and the work of this book. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for the conversation. It's been wonderful.
Well, I don't know who the Barbara is in your life, but I encourage you to take a look around today, find a Barbara, and go do just act. Go do what God tells you to do.
Hi, I'm Ryan Walter, and during my 15-year NHL career, I signed the odd autograph, especially in Montreal. I remember once there was a young boy, and I signed my name, and then I put John 3:16 next to it, underneath it. And he looked up at his dad and he said, "Dad, he's wrong. My name's not John, and it's 3:30." I love that story. You know what I love about John 3:16 is that God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten son. Love that idea. You know where I've been going recently though? Is to John 3:17, right? Where in 16 he sent, but in 17 he says, I didn't send my son to judge the world. I sent my son to save the world. Love that thought.
Have you ever been in a situation where you were just absolutely certain that you were right? Everybody else was wrong. There was no way to think differently. I bet you that's gotten you into a few messes in your course of your life. That's kind of what is a segue to the passage we're going to look at today in the book of Acts, because Paul is once again on trial for his faith in Jesus Christ. He is going to be brought before a man by the name of King Agrippa. But what happens is that the Jewish leaders, they are convinced, but wrongly convinced, that Paul is the antithesis of everything evil and wrong, when rather he is the one who is bringing to Asia Minor the message of God's transforming love. I want to read this passage very briefly in chapter 26, and we'll skip over through verses 1 to 11, but listen to what the king says to Paul as he once again defends himself. He says, Paul, you have permission to speak for yourself. And he says, the Jewish people know that how I've lived ever since I've been a child. He says, from the beginning of my life in my own country and also in Jerusalem. And I can testify to this, he says. And I conformed to the strictest sect of our religion. He had lived as a Pharisee. And now it's because of my hope in what God has promised our ancestors that I am on trial for today. And what was that? That God would send a Messiah and that he would die for the sins of the world and be raised again. And when Paul goes on to talk about what Jesus has done and how he's the fulfillment of the Old Testament law and prophecies, well, this is what gets the religious leaders all up in arms because they want to reject Christ. Do you ever experience that in your journey as well, where people say, I just don't want to listen. I don't want to even give an inch to considering that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. That doesn't change the reality of the matter, though. And as we journey towards Easter, what comes front and center into the sphere of almost everyone, certainly in North America, is what do we do with the resurrection? So Paul is dealing with this here. And Paul was the one who led the list of people convinced that Christ's followers were heretics. They said, oh no, he is the worst of the worst, and that there was absolutely no truth to the message of the resurrection. People want to do that. No. I don't want to hear. I don't want to listen. I don't want to be taken in by the truth that Jesus could have risen from the dead. Let me suggest to you today that you need to be careful about what you believe to be the truth. Maybe you've fabricated in your own mind a preconceived way of saying, if there is a God, I will be right with him, and I will do it in my own way. What Paul sets forth, and he speaks so clearly, is that it is only through Christ that we find hope and that we find the assurance of life after death, which is what is the heartbeat of the resurrection, that Jesus lived, he died, but he also rose again. That message caused so much upheaval in the days of Paul. And it still causes upheaval today because people do not want to think, even for a moment, that it could be true. Because if it is true, then we have to give an account one day to God when we stand before Him. I want to ask you a question in your heart of hearts. How has the teaching of the resurrection impacted your life? And how will it impact the way that you spend your time and your money today? So what does that mean? Well, if the resurrection is true, and I believe that it is, all of us need to give energy to share this incredible news, the hope that we have in Jesus, with friends and families as we journey towards this Easter season.
Will you donate 2 hours of your time? Crossroads Prayer Center is seeking people with a heart willing to join in the amazing work God is doing through prayer. Providing over 1,300 prayer interactions daily, Crossroads Prayer Partners speak biblical truth and words of life over people's need. Join in God's transforming work through prayer and enrich your faith. Learn more at crossroads.ca/prayervolunteer.
I hope today's given you some perspective on poverty and what it means to just act. If you want to get Angie's book, go to where all books are sold, and I encourage you to get it. And you can't give what you don't have. And so if you want to show love to others, you need to receive love for yourself. And maybe you need some prayer. Maybe you need to accept the invitation of Jesus to fill you with his love. Why don't you call us at 1-855-910-6297. We have trusted prayer partners on that at the end of the phone. They're ready to minister and talk to you today. So give us a call. Thank you for joining us at The Perspective today. I hope that you're going to find a barber in your life. You're going to just act today, and let's go and share love with others, because we do know that love heals. God bless you. Thanks for watching.